Welcome to Pod Save America, live. We're taking your questions. With us, as always, Priyanka Arabindi.
Hello.
We got lots to talk about today.
We have lots to talk about today.
Holy shit.
We woke up to a surprise announcement that our friend Robert Mueller would be making a statement.
Yeah, and I have a quick rundown, and we have a little clip to refresh your memory. So let's get straight into it.
We got clips now.
Yeah.
Clips.
All right, so today, Special Counsel Robert Mueller made his first public statement about the conclusions of the Russia investigation while announcing that he's closing his office, resigning from DOJ, and probably trying to find a Mai Tai somewhere on a beach without Wi-Fi or Twitter. He basically said that his office could not clear President Trump of obstruction of justice. If his office had the confidence that the president clearly did not commit a crime, we would have said so. For the record, they did not say so. His office could not accuse Trump of committing a crime even if they thought that he did because of Justice Department guidelines. And only Congress can formally accuse Trump of committing a crime. So Elijah has a clip for us to watch, just to jog our memory, to see it all. Elijah, let's see what we got.
The order appointing me special counsel authorized us to investigate actions that could obstruct the investigation. We conducted that investigation, and we kept the office of the acting attorney general apprised of the progress of our work. And as set forth in the report after that investigation, if we had had confidence that the president clearly did not commit a crime, we would have said so. We did not, however, make a determination as to whether the president did commit a crime. The introduction to the volume 2 of our report explains that decision. It explains that under long-standing department policy, a president cannot be charged with a federal crime while he is in office. That is unconstitutional. Even if the charge is kept under seal and hidden from public view, that too is prohibited. The special counsel's office is part of the Department of Justice, and by regulation, it was bound by that department policy. Charging the president with a crime was therefore not an option we could consider. The department's written opinion explaining the policy makes several important points that further informed our handling of the obstruction investigation. Those points are summarized in our report, and I will describe 2 of them for you. First, the opinion explicitly permits the investigation of a sitting president because it is important to preserve evidence while memories are fresh and documents available. Among other things, that evidence could be used if there were co-conspirators who could be charged now. And second, the opinion says that the Constitution requires a process other than the criminal justice system to formally accuse a sitting president of wrongdoing.
All right. So that was a lot, and we have many questions about this. First up.
Us too.
Why was this a big deal, Mueller speaking out today? He just kind of repeated the report, didn't he? What do we know that's new, and what are the big implications of this?
First of all, we've learned that there are a lot of people who did not read the report. That it turns out
Didn't do your homework.
Turns out that
Congress.
someone reading aloud from the book they wrote gets a lot more attention than reading the book that they wrote.
Yeah, I think the best example of that was, I think Brett Baer on Fox News was like, whoa, this is different. If we had known this, this would be, and it's like, well, he basically said exactly what was in the report. There was, I will say he clarified a few things, and I think he needed to clarify a few things because we now know that the Attorney General, William Barr, lied to Congress and lied to the American people. He didn't misstate things. He didn't shade things. He lied. This is actually what he said in front of the Senate Judiciary Committee. William Barr said Mueller told him 3 times, quote, that he emphatically was not saying that but for the Department of Justice guidelines, he would have found obstruction. Mueller basically says the opposite today.
So we should just break, that's an incredibly important thing because, as much as elite opinion matters, and as much as we live in this system where Trump says something crazy and then a bunch of intellectual Zambonis come up behind him and clean up the mess, there was a really important argument that was part of what Barr said, and it may not have been, plastered across headlines, but it really undergirded a lot of what allowed Barr to make Mueller's report go off with less of a bang than a little fart in the wind. And it was saying that that the Justice Department guidelines say a president can't be charged with a crime. And what Barr said was, that's not the reason Mueller didn't choose to charge Trump. That actually there are other reasons that have nothing to do with the fact that he couldn't do it anyway. And it's a really big deal that Robert Mueller went to the cameras today and said, actually, it is explicitly...
It's the biggest actually ever.
It is explicitly... Actually, that is the reason. That is the reason I did not charge the president with obstruction. What Barr said is the opposite of what is true.
And what Mueller said today that was not in the report is specifically saying, and Priyanka, I think you just said this, and I think we saw this in the clip, we did not have that option. We did not have the option of charging the president with the crime. And then he goes on to say, and this is basically just dancing around the word impeachment. He's saying everything he possibly could but the word impeachment itself. Quote, the Constitution requires a process other than the criminal justice system to formally accuse a sitting president of wrongdoing. That process is impeachment.
There's no other part.
Sweet if I've ever seen one.
It's not Big Brother. It's not American Idol. It's not Chopped. You're not going to do it on Chopped. It's through impeachment.
It's through impeachment.
Okay, so in this statement, Mueller said that he wasn't planning to testify and that the report is his statement. But now that he's resigned, do you think the House should subpoena him, and will he have any limitations on what he can and cannot talk about?
On the limitations, I think he has fewer limitations than if he was a Department of Justice employee. But I do think, classified information, there's still limits on that, even if you're not a DOJ employee. So there are some limits. But I think he's going to be freer to say what he wants to say now that he's a private citizen, though I do believe the DOJ can impose some kind of restrictions. But to the question of whether they should subpoena Robert Mueller, yes. I think Robert Mueller doesn't get to decide whether he speaks or not. I think what he wanted to say today is to make clear that he is not going to go much beyond what he put in the report. He's basically saying, Stop pinning this on me. Stop saying that I'm the one that's going to get you out of this. I told you what I think about this in a 400 fucking page report. It was pretty obvious, I thought, except to all you fucking idiots.
Right. Like
who don't seem to understand what I was trying to say, partly because Bill Barr tried to cover it up.
Yeah, it's not like it's not like when when Mueller shows up to Congress, he opens up his briefcase and takes out the fucking answer. His briefcase is just filled with magic 8 balls at this point. Like, I just don't. What was been needed for it doesn't really make any sense. What we've said for a long time is the importance of Mueller testifying is, and this is something Jon has said actually a lot, which is it matters to hear from him, even if he doesn't say anything particularly new. It matters to see the words leave his square-jawed face. And now we have. So it has become less important to see.
I realize it's hard for everyone to realize this, but it's like the magic of television, like I'm sorry that we're, fucking television addled culture here. But yeah, there's a lot of people who don't read the report. And just by Mueller saying almost exactly what was in the report, he, made a lot of news today. And if he's there in Congress and he even doesn't go very far beyond what he says in the report, it's going to be a big fucking deal. I also, and someone was making this point too, I think that Mueller does not want to go testify in front of Congress if it's just testifying absent an impeachment proceeding, if he's just going there to testify. Because then he worries that he's going to be used as a political prop by the Democrats, by the Republicans. He doesn't want to be used as a political prop. But within the context of impeachment proceedings, which is the legal remedy that Mueller himself spelled out as the way to accuse a sitting president of wrongdoing. Within that context of an impeachment proceeding, people who know Mueller do think he would go testify within that context because now it's an actual legal proceeding that could lead to impeachment.
And he's an expert. He's an expert on what they'd be impeaching him over because he's laying out the case for impeachment. It a little bit feels like, that old old story about like a person drowning in the ocean, and they say to themselves like, God's gonna save me, and a raft comes along and they say, no, God's gonna save me, and a dinghy comes along and they say,
like
no,
a
God's gonna save me, and a
commonly
helicopter comes
told
along.
story?
And anyway, they get to heaven and God's like, I sent you the
Deeply related.
raft, I sent you the dinghy, I sent you the helicopter. I feel like Democratic members of Congress are just floating in the ocean being like, Mueller's gonna come along and say something, the real evidence is gonna come along and say something, and meanwhile it's like, hey guys, there's a lot of shit. Grab on.
Yeah, he put 400 pages together about how the president obstructed justice and obstructed the investigation into Russian interference in our election. I did that for you. What
Yeah.
else do you want me to do?
Float on it like Rose.
Okay, so we have a bunch. We started talking about impeachment here. We have a few questions down those lines.
Sure.
But before we get away from this moment, I just wanted to ask about Robert Mueller's voice. I was personally very surprised by what we heard. I don't think we've heard him speak publicly before. I wanted to get your thoughts really quickly. What did you think? Did it match your expectations, your thoughts in general?
Didn't quite match my expectations. It was a little softer, a little more unsure than I had imagined. I feel like
Yeah.
when Robert Mueller opened his mouth, like thunderbolts would come out.
I expected Jerry Lewis.
It wasn't. I said this to you
Hey,
earlier,
lady.
Priyanka. It wasn't quite like hearing Jared Kushner speak for the first time.
Oh no, that was chilling. That was chilling. That was just a balloon exhaling.
Yeah, it wasn't like that.
I'm sorry, everybody. I just. Yeah.
But it was weird. I don't know.
Yeah, it's odd just to have looked at pictures of someone for so long and not actually have any idea how they sound.
Yeah, it was a thing.
Just a side note. Anyways, back to the questions. This next one, how much do you guys think that Democrats need to capitalize on this moment? They fell short on the Mueller report release, and now we have Mueller himself saying on TV that his report does not exonerate the president. Do they lose the argument if they continue to slow walk this?
Yes. I think so, because there's only going to be so many big media moments like this that offer themselves as a hook for Democrats to say, all right, my mind is made up, we should begin impeachment proceedings. I mean, and this is sort of what the point Lovett was just making, right? Like, they keep throwing us the rafts. you
Yeah,
know?
like this
there's
is
not there's not going to be some blockbuster witness who shows up before Congress and says, you know what? I did see him shoot someone in the middle of Fifth Avenue. I saw it myself. And then everyone's going to be, oh, okay, it's time for impeachment. The Republicans are finally going to go along. Like, yes, for sure, we can continue investigations, and the House should continue investigations on all the different potential wrongdoing from the administration. But I don't know that there's going to be anything bigger or a bigger blockbuster than Robert Mueller saying, Russia interfered in our election, the President of the United States obstructed that investigation, and we couldn't charge him with a crime because there's a constitutional process for doing that, but here's all the evidence of his obstruction.
Yeah, I mean,
I don't know
it's
when your case is going to be stronger.
Well, it's also it's all a big charade, if you will. That everyone's like, oh, impeachment's theater. Well, what do people actually think, right? This is not a situation in which we're trying to make an argument in good faith to people that disagree that Donald Trump committed impeachable offenses. There are very few people in Congress, Democrat or Republican, who deep down believe Donald Trump is innocent. There are very few people who believe who actually sincerely believe he didn't commit impeachable offenses. When Justin Amash came out and said what he said, when the Amash brothers came out, Amash mouth. It's a live stream. What's going to happen? Nothing. No consequences. When he came out and said what he said, and it took actually political courage and integrity to say what he said, there was all these reporters who immediately pointed out that Republicans behind the scenes agree with him. That, of course, they agree with him. And Democrats publicly say that Donald Trump committed impeachable offenses. So they publicly say they agree with him. They don't just take the logical conclusion. So we have two groups of people privately who believe he committed impeachable offenses, people who publicly believe he committed impeachable offenses but shouldn't be impeached. So when people say that impeachment is the theater, impeachment is doing what we all believe to be true. The theater is pretending that we're going through some kind of a process when really what is happening is there's a set of obvious facts that there is a group of people whose reputations and careers depend on not recognizing, and us trying to find out ways to make them see what's obvious when they probably never will. So we should probably just tell the fucking truth.
I also believe that Democrats need to understand that the jury according to the Constitution, is the Senate. But the real jury here is the voters. The reason for an impeachment trial is not because we believe that we're going to convince 20 Republicans in the Senate to finally show courage and vote to convict this man of the crimes that he's committed. It's to make the case for why Donald Trump shouldn't be president in 2020 to the American people. Make one case that is going to be televised all the time, live impeachment hearings, day after day after day. It is the perhaps one option for taking away the megaphone from Donald Trump, who is the world's assignment editor, who can command attention anytime he wants. The only thing that can stop him from taking that attention away, from commanding that attention, is to begin impeachment trials that will be televised live on television for weeks and weeks and weeks at a time. And then we make an argument why this man is unfit for office to the millions and millions of Americans watching who will go to the polls in 2020. Maybe it will change zero minds. Perhaps. But if it changes a couple in a close election, there you go.
I also just think, does everyone feel like what we're doing now is working?
Right.
We live in it's a liminal space halfway between nothing and impeachment. It fucking sucks. Democrats are demoralized. Republicans are emboldened. Trump is emboldened. His administration is emboldened. This is what will drag on until we find a way to wrench the conversation to healthcare or the economy or taxes or whatever takes place in 2020 to kind of make our main argument. But right now, this space halfway between sucks. It sucks living here, where we have investigations that can't get off the ground because they're ignoring the subpoenas because they recognize that they're ultimately toothless. We have Democrats crying bloody murder at Maggie Haberman for pointing out that Hope Hicks has determined that whether or not to honor a subpoena is a choice, when in fact that's exactly the situation we find ourselves in because we see a bunch of Republican operatives and Republican administration officials deciding that agreeing with a subpoena or not is a choice. So it may culminate in a acquittal by the Senate, Donald Trump crowing on Twitter that he's been exonerated, but at least then there's a process to make the full case, force Republicans and Democrats to go on the record, declare it was a partisan outcome even if he's acquitted, and then we could move on, but at least we'll have done the thing. The one thing left, the one big step we can take to make a case.
Okay, so about the thing, we got a good basic question here. Can you guys break down how impeaching proceedings are initiated? I see a bunch of members of Congress and the Senate tweeting about how we need to start them. How does this happen?
The House Judiciary Committee is the committee responsible for opening an impeachment inquiry. So, however many members are on the Judiciary Committee, obviously it's controlled by Democrats because Democrats control the House. Jerry Nadler is the chair of the House Judiciary Committee. Nadler would call a vote. If there is a majority on the committee that are in favor of opening an impeachment inquiry, then an impeachment inquiry is opened. Then that committee, the House Judiciary Committee, would hear evidence, hear testimony, and the hearings, the so-called impeachment hearings, would be conducted by the House Judiciary Committee over weeks, months, whatever it takes. Then the Judiciary Committee would vote again. Do we recommend impeachment to the full House of Representatives? If they vote yes on that, after all that, they send it to the House. Then the entire House votes. If there's a majority of the House that recommends that the president be impeached, then Donald Trump becomes the third president in history to be impeached by the House. Then there is a trial in the Senate. Chief Justice John Roberts, the Supreme Court, presides over the trial. He sits in the chair. And the House committee chairs act as lawyers. They're managers, and they basically present the evidence to the members of the Senate. We call more witnesses during the Senate trial, and then the Senate votes.
Fun fact, John. Lindsey Graham was actually one of those managers for an obstruction of justice impeachment
True.
against Bill Clinton.
That's very true. And then
Fun fact.
You need 67 votes in the Senate to convict the president and remove him from office. If not, then he goes down like Bill Clinton and Andrew Johnson as someone who was impeached but not removed from office.
And then they just, live with that. Can I also just say something too, which is that I have not been totally sold the arguments for impeachment politically. I think the legal arguments, the moral arguments are unassailable and undeniable. I've been open to the political arguments. And I also think Pelosi deserves some credit because I think sometimes people attribute what she's saying to her actual view when in fact she's trying to manage a caucus, and she knows that there's probably she knows a big chunk of her caucus, as she said today, is not for this yet, and she's very good at letting her caucus take her to where she wants to be. But I've had this sort of feeling for a while that maybe impeachment isn't politically advantageous in the way that we want. Maybe it ultimately doesn't result in Donald Trump being removed. There are consequences to it we're maybe not foreseeing. But one thing that has become increasingly clear to me is that what we're doing is not working. And I don't know another option. And I increasingly think that when you're confronted with someone like Donald Trump, you may not like the tools at your disposal. You may not have all the answers. You may feel cowed and bullied and exhausted by the ways in which he obstructs and uses institutions against us. But at the end of the day, what I land on as the simplest option is when you're confronted by someone like Donald Trump, the only thing you can do is everything you can. And to me, impeachment is everything we can.
Yeah, I mean, I think we have not talked enough about what happens if there is no impeachment, right? And, there's an argument, okay, the majority of the American people are not for impeachment right now. Democrats are in favor of it. Independents are slightly opposed. Republicans are obviously very opposed. We need independent and Republican voters. They helped us win the House in the first place. Nancy Pelosi needs those voters to maintain her speakership next time around. And so if these people are all against impeachment, what are we doing when we have better arguments on healthcare, wages, all the other kind of stuff? All that's true. But that also presupposes that the runway from now until the election in 2020 is going to be clear, and that we're just going to have a free and fair, easy election in 2020 to make our case for why, Trump's going to take away your health care and we're going to give you more health care and all that other kind of stuff, and then everyone goes to the polls and that's that. When we have seen over the last couple of months especially that that's not the runway that we're going to have, that he's already started to use the powers of the presidency to target his political enemies, that he's using the Department of Justice to open investigation into his political opponents, that he could very easily ask foreign governments once again to interfere in our election on his behalf. This is not going to be a free and fair election. And so the question for Democrats is, does impeachment stop all that? Maybe not. But is it the only tool that we have that we haven't used yet? Yeah. And so because we don't know the politics of it, then maybe we should do whatever we can do to stop what is a very abnormal presidency that we've been saying since the beginning.
I also just, again, this is also isn't about predicting what happens when you do it, right? I don't know what happens when you do it.
We don't know.
I also think one possibility that people aren't discussing enough is we do it, and it's neither here nor there. It's
totally
not some
possible.
great change in how people see Donald Trump. It's also not some deleterious thing that prevents Democrats from making a case come the fall. That it's just a 2-month reverie and focus on this problem that is hard to measure, in terms of what it actually caused in public perceptions, in views about Donald Trump's corruption, et cetera, et cetera. So there is a real possibility that we end up in a situation like that. I mean, you can make an argument that that's what happened with the Clinton impeachment. So, that it was this big frenetic thing. The American people wanted to move forward, but by the way, George W. Bush was able to campaign on a message of restoring dignity to the office, and he made that a big part of his case. So, I think
and the fact that we can't remember news that happened 2 days ago speaks to that very possibility.
Yeah, Donald Trump just walked out of a meeting with Nancy Pelosi, and people were like, "That has never happened before." He did it 4 months ago.
Yeah, exactly.
The same exact. Literally, maybe he used the same script.
Well, Robert Mueller said things today and be like, "Explosive." It's like, yeah, he was in the fucking report. Did he forget the report already? So, you're right that the very likely outcome of this could be that we go through an impeachment, he's acquitted, and we're not talking about it in September, October of 2020.
In fairness to reporters, it is true that Robert Mueller speaks like a fucking riddle of the Sphinx. He gets out there and he says things like, "It is my conclusion that Donald Trump did not commit the crimes for which I cannot accuse him, but would if I could, and he weren't."
But not with any of that emphasis.
No.
Just all kind of in the same tone.
No, now, thanks, Bob. One more time with feeling, but then throw it away. What are we talking about?
So in this process that you guys laid out, a bunch of people are on Twitter right now asking us if we can talk about how this goes in the Senate. So we have 1 and 2 here. 1, even if, as most believe, the Senate would never convict, is there something to be gained by making Republican senators up for re-election listen to the evidence and justify their vote? And then second question, can Mitch McConnell block a trial in the Senate?
The second question, no, he cannot. On the first question, yeah, I think, in fact, I don't
Imagine if we said no, no value. Yeah, there's value.
Yeah, because I think it's important of how Democrats set this up, because, and Pfeiffer made this point a few months ago, the anxiety is once Trump is exonerated by his Republican lackeys in the Senate, he runs around saying total exoneration, and now look at Trump. Now when he says total exoneration, he's right, because
he's backed up by a verdict.
I think Democrats have to go into this being like, we do not expect Republican senators to show political courage for the first time in the Trump presidency by doing the right thing. But if we're going to all face voters in 2020, they need to face voters with the vote that they decide in impeachment, and we'll do the same thing. And if Cory Gardner, who's going to be in a tight race in Colorado, wants to say that the president has done nothing wrong, even though Robert Mueller has laid out evidence of obstruction, Cory Gardner can take that vote. If Susan Collins in Maine wants to take a vote and say that the president has done nothing wrong, even though we've laid out all this evidence for the last couple of months, Susan Collins is free to take that vote. And we're all going to take our votes, and we'll see what the voters say.
You also have to imagine, too, that these are votes that will come with statements. And I don't know what the future holds. No one does. But one thing that if there is a trial in the Senate, you can imagine is Mitt Romney voting no on removing Donald Trump and putting out a very sad statement about the crimes and mistakes of this president and the shame he's brought to his office. Like, this is not there's no clean way out of impeachment for the party whose president is being impeached. I don't care how bad things have gotten. I don't care how much politics seems to have changed. The other thing I would just add is nobody knows the future. Nobody knows what happens through an impeachment inquiry and what happens in a trial in the Senate. Obviously, it's outlandish to imagine things changing dramatically, and yet Richard Nixon had, I believe, an above 50% approval rating among Republicans like a few days before he resigned. Things look like they can't change, and then all of a sudden they fall apart. That could be true for the Trump administration. Could be true for America. Really could go either way.
Okay, as with every announcement, I ask, will this really change anyone's mind? It seems like everyone's already on the side of their choosing, and nothing can sway those opinions. Do we think those opinions, or any opinions, are getting changed by what we saw today?
We have no idea, but if we didn't believe that opinions could be changed, we wouldn't do campaigns.
Hey, we can shut this whole podcast down. I can finally do the Star Trek podcast I've been dreaming of.
Yeah, I mean, it's an important point. Like, we have no idea if this will change any minds, but people who say definitively that it will not change any minds don't know what the fuck they're talking about.
And also, it's there's not just one big blob of mind we need to convert from leave him in office to remove him from office. There's a chunk of Republicans who, ironically, don't seem to believe in vaccines, but are vaccinated against objectivity because of Fox News and other Trumpian media. But so, there's a chunk of people who will never be persuaded. We don't need to persuade them. What we have seen, what is clear over the past 2.5 years, 3 years, is that there is still a big chunk of people in the middle that are movable. Sometimes it's just what's on their minds, right? Like the Access Hollywood tape happens. They remember why they don't want to ever vote for Donald Trump. They then soon get sort of lulled back into being uncomfortable with both candidates. We saw in 2018 a huge swing, not only in independents voting for Democrats, but people who never voted for young people turning out in huge numbers to vote for Democrats in a way that was transformative and new. I mean, there's a poll that came out today that showed for the first time Gen Xers and millennials and younger outvoted older voters. That is a form of persuasion. So, the engine's throwing off sparks and fucking screws and chunks of tire, but we're still moving forward. This car still runs.
Justin Amash represents a district in Michigan that is 6 points more Republican than the national average. It's an R+6 district. He walked into a town hall over the weekend, and a couple hundred people there, they all stood up and gave him a standing ovation because of what he did.
Yeah,
this is a Republican district. And there was like 3 people who said, what are you doing? Are you part of the deep state coup? Which, out of a crowd that big in a Republican district, not too bad. Not too bad. So the point is you never know. You never know how people are going to react until you actually lead and do something, as opposed to just worry about what the polls are going to tell you to do.
Yeah.
Okay, this is the last thing before we move on to our different topics. This is less of a question, more of a statement, and we are fine with that, actually, because this person is asking if we can please tell our listeners to call their reps in Congress and voice their opinion on the matter. That is all. We have a phone number for you. It's the switchboard of the Capitol, 202-224-3121. Give your reps, give your senators a call. Let them know how you feel. Guys, do you have anything to add before we move?
We agree with that statement.
Perfect.
Good statement.
Good statement.
Do a phone call.
Give him a call. Look, I mean, I think it was a couple weeks ago before this happened today that Katie Hill, who's obviously from a district just north of here in LA, said calls into her office were 2-1 against impeachment for a while, and now they've moved 4-1 for impeachment.
Mm-hmm.
So it matters. Like when there's 38 Democrats now who've said that they're for impeachment, which means there's 200 something who are either undecided or opposed. Look up your member of Congress, find out where they stand, and put those calls in, because especially for Democrats, they can be persuaded. It's a real thing.
That is actually too. Yes, changing Republican minds very difficult. Figuring that out, it's a real pickle. For the future of America, the planet, whether we have ice caps, all that. But thorny, really sticky wicket. But there are 200 very persuadable House Democrats. Like, those are people that a personal call from you really does make a difference. Going to their town halls when they come home over the next break, whenever they take a break from, I don't know, whatever they do, whatever they're fucking doing. Say hi and tell them that this is an issue for you. That you're, I don't want to say you're an impeachment voter, but maybe you're an impeachment voter.
All right, one more time. That's 202-224-3121 if you want to give your reps a call. All right, we'll move into 2020 questions because we have some fun new news today as well. The people want to know, what are your thoughts on the DNC's new qualifying rules for the third debate? I can read them to you if we need them off the top of our heads. So basically, they're doubling the thresholds that candidates need to meet to show up to the third debate. So they need to be hitting over 2% in 4 major polls, and they need 130,000 unique donors, including 400 from 20 states. So what do you guys think about this moving the threshold up?
Yeah, and then the other thing is, so for the first and second debate, it was 1% in 3 polls or 65,000 individual donors. For the third and fourth debate, it's, as you said, 2% in 4 polls and 130,000 unique donors, 400 unique donors per state in at least 20 states. Look, it is very difficult to figure out how you solve this problem of 23 candidates on debate stages. So, no matter what, I don't think there's a perfect solution here. But to me, it does seem fair that you have, everyone has been now campaigning for a couple months. By June and July, when we have the first and second debates, that'll be 5-6 months of campaigning. And then there are 2 chances for every single person in this race who hit the first threshold to be on that debate stage and make their case to the American people. And so then by September, which is when the third debate is, we're talking about September, that is, 9 months into this election cycle. If at that point you can't hit 2% in the polls and you can't get 130,000 individual donors, then maybe that is a good way to do it.
Yeah, no, I respect it. I think it's a difficult balance to strike. I don't think anyone's had a better idea. And to me, I think that there's 2 equities that are really, really important. One is making sure that the DNC gives everyone their fair chance. And I think the first 2 debates will do that. I do think there's another equity that won't be as well served in the first 2 debates, but that is incredibly important, which is making sure that this debate represents the ideological and philosophical debates at the core the Democratic primary process, the big conversation that Democrats are having all together to figure out who to represent them. And I don't know who the front runners are going to be when we get to that third debate, but I want to know that they're on stage together talking to one another. I do. I want to know that whether it's, Bernie representing a revolution or Elizabeth Warren representing a critique of capitalism or Joe Biden representing a more kind of mainstream, center-left version of what it means to be a Democrat. It was a delicate dance figuring out how to phrase that one. But
well, this isn't.
I want them
I
on
liked
stage.
watching that in real time.
This isn't 2016 where we're saying there's 20 candidates and we need to get them all off stage so that Hillary and Bernie can go at each other, right? Because the candidates this would leave you with are likely Joe Biden, Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren, Kamala Harris, Pete Buttigieg, Beto O'Rourke, Amy Klobuchar, Cory Booker, probably. That's still 8 candidates that we have to see on stage together and make up our minds who we like. That's still a lot of candidates to choose between, and I think at some point the Democratic Party has to say, we have a lot of good potential candidates up here, and they are ideologically different, they're diverse, they come from different parts of the party, they have different experiences, different backgrounds, and you still have a tough job to do making up your mind between this many candidates. But here they are all on stage debating each other. And that's still hard. And
You
that's
go
in
to the
Septe-
chief-
and keep in mind, in September of 2019, there's only 2 or 3 months left until voting begins.
You go to the Cheesecake Factory, all right? You open up that fucking menu. You got 40 pages of fantastic options, all right? You just can't believe how many good options there are for what you're going to eat at the Cheesecake Factory. There's even ads in that thing you got to go buy. At a certain point, though, you just have to say to yourself, you know what? Maybe fish tacos would have been good tonight. Maybe I would have gone crazy and gotten a steak at the Cheesecake Factory like a fucking animal. I don't know. But at some point, you just have to say to yourself, it's a chicken night. And we're just going to choose from chicken options across this menu. You got to winnow. You got to winnow to give yourself the best chance of choosing the right option, which is always crusted chicken Romano. But what candidate is that? What candidate is crusted chicken Romano?
I don't know if he is or not, but I just want to talk about Mayor Pete for a second. I do think his example is instructive because you're probably going to have some candidates who say, I just need more time to break out of the pack here. And I need more time and more exposure to break out of my 1%. Well, Mayor Pete launched his campaign, It was sometime in February. The CNN Town Hall / Pod Save America interview with Dan Pfeiffer, equal. Mm-hmm. Launched his candidacy into the stratosphere, a month later, and then now he's, one of the top 5 or 6 candidates. So it only took Mayor Pete like a month. And so if some of these candidates are still complaining that they're under 1% and not on the debate stage 5, 6, 7 months in, I don't have Mayor Pete did it. So if you're as exciting as him, then you should be able to do it too.
I'd say 2 things to that. One, I'd say he's a Madeira.
I don't.
I'd say Madeira. 2, yeah, exactly. If what your claim is that you haven't had the chance to prove that you are a unique voice who belongs on that debate stage, you got to figure out what it is that you're saying that's not breaking through and say something else. You know what I mean? It's like at a certain point, it's
it's fair.
Shit or get off the town hall. You know
fair.
what I mean?
I don't know if that
Delightful.
workshop that a little bit.
All right. We're going to shift gears a little bit.
Are we?
Would you guys mind discussing Beto's comprehensive immigration reform package that got buried by the Mueller announcement this morning?
Tough day to announce a comprehensive immigration
Tough
package.
day.
But yes, I will. So this now makes Beto one of only 2 candidates. The other is Julian Castro, who have announced and rolled out comprehensive immigration proposals, detailed policy proposals, which is sort of surprising in the field so far that there's only 2. But so via executive order, there'd be, no more wall, obviously, no ban, the travel ban's over, no family separations, that's over. This is interesting. No more deportations for immigrants unless they have dangerous criminal backgrounds. And he believes they can do that via executive order as well. As part of the enforcement mechanism, he would separate immigration courts from the Department of Justice. So they would be their own Article 1 courts and not part of DOJ, which has allowed Sessions and now Barr to kind of implement the family separation stuff. He would end for-profit prisons and detention centers. He's got a new thing called community-based visas, which would allow certain communities and congregations to sponsor refugees. So if you're a community that wanted to take in refugees, you could do that.
That's cool.
He would raise the cap on visas, also regionally, so that you can match the number of visas and you want to give immigrants to the economic needs for that region. And then, of course, pathway to citizenship for 11 million undocumented immigrants. He would expedite that. And then also for the 9 million immigrants who are here, who are already here, but not documented, but have green cards or temporary protected status or whatever it may be. He wants to expedite that process for naturalization and would make naturalization free. So you'd get a pre-paid for, filled out form mailed to you. You'd sign it, and then you could be naturalized faster, which is a cool thing. Oh, and then there's a foreign policy component that Castro also has talked about too, and some other candidates, which is he wants to give 5 million to Central American countries to work with them to reduce violence there, so that fewer people are seeking asylum in the first place. That's the plan.
Shit or get off the podium?
Nothing? All right, we're going to skip ahead to the fun questions. We got a few. The first one is another non-question, but I feel like you're going to like it. It's just Fleabag. That's it. There's nothing after one word.
Thank you for a great question. Everybody's tweeting, you got to watch Fleabag. You got to watch this Amazon Prime show, Fleabag. And I think to myself, Fleabag, that's a terrible title for something I'm probably not going to... It's so good. It's 12 magnificent episodes by Phoebe Waller-Bridge, who's a genius and who I will follow to anything she makes. She's making Killing Eve, which I just started. Fleabag is incredible. She also played a robot, and the, to my mind, only redeeming part of Solo. All right? People don't know that. Elijah didn't even know that. Think about somebody who's writing Killing Eve, starring in Fleabag, and playing a robot in a Star Wars movie. That is a triple threat if I have ever fucking heard one. End of answer.
Got another TV question for you. Can Chernobyl and Watchmen soon carry the HBO mantle after Game of Thrones' departure? What do we think?
First of all, I only saw the first episode of Fleabag, which was fantastic, so I really got to dig into Fleabag. That's on my list. Chernobyl I have not started yet.
Look,
but I've heard
Lovett makes a great
fantastic
pitch.
things about Chernobyl.
Yeah. The reviews have been glowing. Yeah, the thing radiates intensity, but no. So I don't know if Chernobyl can replace Game of Thrones. It's only 6 or 5 episodes, and it's not like I would not call it a beach read of a watch. You know what I mean? It's
Game
very
of Thrones
intense.
A beach read of a
What?
watch?
Well, I just mean that it's a very harrowing story about a very difficult and ugly and violent thing that happened. I do think it is beautiful and worth watching, and does complement Game of Thrones in the sense that I think what we talked about in our Game of Thrones episodes, they're both showing what happens not when heroes emerge to solve a problem, but when people try their best inside of a system that's making all kinds of determinations for them and trying to struggle even though they make mistakes. Jared Harris plays one of the leads. He's fantastic. And he actually makes mistakes. He makes huge mistakes in trying to solve this Chernobyl problem, as anybody would, but he just keeps going. So I think Chernobyl is an incredible achievement by Craig Mazin and the director, whose name eludes me, who's also fantastic. The music's fantastic. Watchmen, I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah.
They got me on the hook.
Looks good.
They got me on the hook. And I see Don Johnson in that trailer. I am on the hook. Don Johnson is back. Watchmen. Don Johnson.
All right.
Don motherfucking Johnson. I think.
I'm glad we got there.
And that's all for the stream
That's it?
today. That's all we got for you.
You excited about Don Johnson?
Don motherfucking Johnson.
Don Johnson. Don Johnson is back.
Well, that's all the time we have for today.
I think I can go for another 13 minutes.
Oh!
Shitter get off the pod, says Elijah.
Elijah from downtown.
What's the phrase? Esprit d'escalade. Google it. I don't even know if I said it right because French is nonsense.
Shoot or get off the pod.
End of stream.